Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 873 for the 29th of June, 2025. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Looking forward to this week's episode. We're going to start off with the Book of Tim without Tim Mendham. Oh yes, this is a special segment dedicated to Tim Mendham, who is just about to step down as editor of the Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, and his duties as executive officer for Australian Skeptics after many years. So Tim, the first part of the show is a tribute to you, and for hard work hardly seems appropriate, the term. It doesn't even cover all the things that Tim Mendham has done for skepticism. Find out more with the Book of Tim without Tim Mendham. Following that, because of my work lately on water divining and dowsing skills and testing and James Randi in Australia and all that sort of stuff, I read from Swift. I read the words of James Randi from the magazine, the short-lived magazine in the late 90s, called Swift, and all about James Randi's thoughts on water divining, water dowsing, and it's very good. It's a really concise, interesting look at the claims of water diviners and testing. And to round off the show, more about the life and times of James Randi in the Trove segment, and we look at a report from 1974. It's so interesting to see when you look at the life of James Randi, his activities over the decades, and when he was doing this, when he metamorphosed from a magician into a more skeptical activist. And anyway, this is from a newspaper called The Daily Item. And speaking of Tim Mendham and newspapers and magazines and so on, we have a note here from Tim. Tim has sent out to subscribers to The Skeptic, and Tim mentions that the last issue of The Skeptic should have appeared by now, but it's still being finessed, still being worked on. This is an important issue. After what, 44 years, something like that, the incredible amount of work has gone into that magazine over the decades. So that has been delayed slightly. So if you're a subscriber to the Skeptic Magazine, fear not, it is coming, but there is a lot to do, you can understand, to get the final edition out to you. Keep an eye on your inbox and your letterbox. A big shout out to those people in Australia who shortly will be on holidays, a little time away from work. I hope you can have a nice rest. And I send a big shout out, as I like to do, to my teacher friends. It's such an important job and so undervalued in our society. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, tripping over the cats who are waiting outside the door. They always do that. I'm going to have some ham and eggs, or salmon and eggs, or salmon and toast. Any number of that combination. Who knows? While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Friends, skeptics, citizens, lend me your ears. I have come to praise Mendham, not to bury him. As you might know, if you subscribe to the Skeptics newsletter, the Australian Skeptics newsletter, and it's been mentioned on this podcast, Tim Mendham, the editor of the Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, and executive officer of Australian Skeptics, is retiring. In fact, by the time this podcast comes out on the 29th of June, Tim will have barely 1 day left in his official capacity. Now, Tim Mendham has been involved with skepticism for decades. In fact, this is not his first stint in being the editor of the Skeptic Magazine. Tim first took up the position in 1986. In fact, Volume 6, Number 4. In those days, the Skeptics was written on primitive, by today's standards, computers with things like floppy disks as storage and basic layout programs. Tim stayed as editor for a number of years until Volume 10, Number 1. Now, as you probably know, as I've mentioned on the Skeptic Zone quite a few times, all the back issues of the Skeptic Magazine going back to 1981, all but the latest couple of issues, are available free at the Skeptics website at skeptics.com.au. So it might be interesting to see what the very first issue Tim did as editor was all about. Well, it dates from November 1986. And there are stories here about the great Sydney Uni cancer case, news from overseas, a report from the Psychop conference, the paranormal, fact or fantasy, and more about creationism and UFOs. I expect Tim put these news items together, including one here on page 5, Amazing Randi, one of 25 MacArthur Genius winners. James Randi, the Amazing Randi, the magician known to scientists for shooting holes in research on paranormal phenomena, has been awarded one of this year's MacArthur Foundation grants for, quote, outstandingly talented, end quote, people. Randi was cited for his works in exposing the fraud behind psychic surgery and for his recent campaign against television evangelists. We have a report here about Psychop, the conference, a conference report, and the text is double justified, sort of. It looks funny from all these years later to see how primitive the effort to double justify was in those days. It works, but the spacing is very odd. We even have a cartoon. There's a woman on the phone, and she turns and says to her presumably husband, "Hey Fred, you've won the Australian Skeptics Award." And Fred in the chair looks back and says, "I believe it when I see it." And it's interesting to notice by the next issue, Tim had whipped the magazine into shape somewhat, and the look and feel is more professional. Now, Tim continued until the autumn here in Australia of 1990, and again the magazine underwent a cosmetic change. From 1990 until 2009, the magazine was edited by the late Barry Williams, only to have Tim Mendham come back into the chair for Volume 29, Number 3, in September 2009. And once again, the magazine underwent a facelift, a change, an overhaul, and it remained more or less in the same configuration until this very year. And soon we'll see the very final issue of the Skeptic Magazine as a printed copy in its current form. And in 2009, when Tim returned, we have reports about Leo Igwe, Simon Singh, Vax campaigns, Las Vegas. I interview Joe Nickel, the late Joe Nickel, and Joe gets a tribute in the current issue of Skeptical Inquirer, and I was pleased to contribute to that too. One of the other contributors to that issue is the late Michael Wallahan, one of the original reporters here at the Skeptic Zone. So since Tim's return, he has edited something like 60 issues of the Skeptic Magazine, and not only edited, my friends, much of the content is by Tim himself. And I have in front of me on my iPad all of the back issues of the magazine, and if I just pick one at random, and I happen to land on Volume 38, Number 1 from March 2018, the before times before the pandemic, we can see that apart from the editorial in every issue, Tim Mendham writes a considerable amount of the magazine himself, including such regulars as Reader's Indigestible and What Goes Round, or The Cycle of Life, which Tim has reported upon here at the Skeptic Zone, a regular feature in the magazine. Tim has also, as executive officer, been on the front line of contact from the public and media since 2009, which means almost daily calls from people wanting to demonstrate to us their magical psychic abilities, endless correspondence from people wanting to find out more and maybe apply for our prize, and of course contacts from the media. And it was great to know that the committee could rely on Tim to be a credible, skeptical voice for the media, which is not easy. You really have to know your stuff. And talking about knowing your stuff, nobody knows their skeptical stuff quite like Tim Mendham. He is able to talk with authority and knowledge on a huge variety of skeptical topics, and this comes from long experience and research. He is able to be diplomatic when it comes to people calling the skeptics hotline to find out more information, and sometimes that is difficult. But wait, there's more. Part of Tim's work responsibilities including a lot of administration to do with running an organisation like the Australian Skeptics. Paperwork, endless paperwork, bank accounts to worry about, forms, government forms for this, that, and the other. Organising conventions. One of the most rewarding, but yet one of the most difficult and frustrating things for any group to do is organise big conventions. And last year especially, it fell to Tim Mendham to do much of the organisation for a very successful convention we had here in Sydney, including Tim's idea to bring in school children to present. And that was a very popular presentation indeed. Having been on the organising committee for quite a few conventions, I can tell you what hard work that is to wrangle the speakers, the venue, catering, any number of things. And I think that speaks very highly to Tim's dedication. Tim has certainly received international recognition for his contribution to the skeptical movement. Indeed, Tim Mendham was made a fellow for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. But of course you know Tim, listening to this, you know Tim from the segment The Book of Tim, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, where Tim did, and I hope still will, read segments of the Skeptic Magazine, because there are, I'd hate to think how many thousands of reports, articles, interviews, and investigations are there. It's great to read them, but it's really great to have Tim Mendham read them to you. I think of that song, You Don't Know What You've Got Till It's Gone, and I think the Australian skeptics are about to discover how much we relied on Tim. And Hilda, Tim and Hilda Mendham, who did the design, a lot of the graphical work, the design for the Skeptic Magazine. And there are all sorts of other things like turning up at Skeptics in the pub to introduce the speaker and being on hand generally at these events to answer questions. But the one thing I don't think Tim ever got the hang of was bending spoons.
Ring, 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 ring. Oh, it's the imaginary phone, only I can hear. Hello? Oh, Tim Mendham is retiring. They finally caught him. He's Tim Mendham is he's voluntarily retiring. Well, that's still good to hear. Bit late nonetheless, but still good to hear. And you'd like me to say a few words? Sure. Circumnavigation, isotope, Judith Durham. There you go. There's three. In fact, the last one was a proper noun. Okay, hang on a minute. Hang on. What do you call someone who has given many years of their life to the skeptical movement and who writes great articles? Michael Marshall, you might call him. But in this case, but don't worry about that. We'll talk about Tim Mendham. Now, Tim, of course, is one of the few Australians to have had a major tussle with a ringtail possum. In fact, he's had a major tussle with the ringtail possum's poo. And as any Australian will tell you, the ringtail possum's poo is among the smelly of all marsupials, top 3 easily. So that's one thing I know about Tim. Also, he has fielded for the last 300 years with the Australian Skeptics every crank in the country who thinks they can win the $17 challenge that's been going on. Oh, no, I think I can see something on the television. No, it's got to be more extraordinary than that. Oh, I can see things on several channels on the television. No, I'm sorry, goodbye. That is his life for the last 300 years, and we've still got that $17. Woohoo! In fact, I would like to award Tim Mendham one of the highest honours in the country by calling him Mr. Skeptic. Not Skeptic of the Year, none of these other rubbish titles, Mr. Skeptic. So when someone says, oh, Mr. Skeptic, Tim Mendham is the one you think of. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for your service. Thank you for putting up with the possums, and may you enjoy your retirement. And I'm glad they didn't catch you.
Hey Tim, Susan Gerbic here from the Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia project. Congratulations on your retirement. Thank you for your amazing contributions. And I assume this means you have time to join the JSOW Wikipedia project now. I hope to be hearing from you.
This is Ben Radford offering a hearty thank you to the great Tim Mendham, who has expertly guided the Australian skeptics for some 20-odd years, most of them quite odd, and is retiring. I've long been a fan of his work, having, of course, seen it online in each issue of the Skeptic Magazine, and we corresponded by email on occasion. But I finally had the chance to put a name to the face last year when I was invited to speak at the Australian Skeptics Conference. It was such a delight meeting him, swapping war stories, and tromping around the harbour with him and Richard. I'm going to miss both Tim and the Skeptic, but of course, neither one's really going away. The Skeptic is going virtual, and Tim will be around in other, less official capacities. It really is people like Tim and Richard and others like them who are the backbones of skepticism. Yes, he's a journalist. Yes, he's an investigator and editor, and awfully funny, with or without a cold one in him. Tim, I appreciate your decades of hard work and wish you well on your retirement. Like it or not, you can expect to keep hearing from me. I look forward to many more exchanges and discussions. Cheers, mate.
This is Jessica Singer, President of Australian Skeptics. Hi, Tim. So long, and thank you for all the issues of The Skeptic. Thanks also to Hilda for her wonderful design work. And actually, it's not really so long and goodbye, is it? Because you will still continue to be a skeptic, and you'll continue to be part of Australian Skeptics. You're not going to escape. We're not going to let you go. And in fact, I look forward to working with you for many, many years to come.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios. And today I would like to talk a little bit about Tim Mendham. I've worked with Tim since 2021, when he asked me to write about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project that I was a volunteer for at the time. And it was published in The Skeptic, Volume 41. Tim cleverly named it Not for Profit, spelled Prophet. And this was my first instance of having my writing published in a skeptical magazine. Before I knew better, I agreed to read Tim's bi-weekly Australian Skeptics newsletter for the Skeptic Zone podcast, where I learned about his sense of humor, wit, and panache for a plethora of purposely problematic prose. I started noticing progressively more difficult tongue twisters, culminating, in my opinion, with lemon lineaments, which he promptly proceeded to publish in several subsequent newsletters. And yes, he helped me grow to appreciate the allure of alliteration as illustrated with this 2022 New Year statement. Quote, "So we've avoided overdosing on the virus and vaccines in this first newsletter for 2022 by kicking off with more important subjects like psychics, science, pseudoscience, skepticism, and haunted pubs." End quote. And of course I got to read this beauty every year as the Australian Skepticon conference approached, and they were looking for nominations of the Bent Spoon Award. The person who would win this was the, quote, "perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle," end quote. Now, Tim may not have coined this phrase, but he did instruct me to say pseudoscientific piffle to maintain the alliteration, which I was more than happy to do. I can truly give Tim credit for my nickname as the Zone Giggler. There I go. How can I not giggle when he writes about a polyglot of paranormalities, that some claim that Nicolas Cage was a vampire, that a ghost's penis was caught on camera by paranormal fans, that a person named Mystic Veg could predict the future by using asparagus, that Teslas see the dead, or that Demi Lovato sings to ghosts to help them overcome trauma caused by sexism. Honestly, Tim, I don't know where you found this stuff. Finally, how can I not guffaw when Tim introduces me to the plethora of psychic pets, including Alfie the alpaca, Banana the psychic seal, and Speckles the crocodile? And finally, how can I not chuckle as Tim includes new words that I am unfamiliar with, such as lolly, boffin, shonky, and preposterous piffleters. One new word that I did not chortle at when I learned what a quokka was. Now that earned a very warm "aww," because they're adorable. And finally, how can I not snicker when I read about the most haunted places in the world? Multiple places like to claim this honor for multiple years, and they keep forgetting to mention any place in Australia. Or that Pluckley, which is 2 hours outside of London, seems to be perpetually the most haunted place in the UK. And finally, and yes, Tim liked to employ this repeated word strategy to emphasize a point in the newsletter. And thank you, Tim, for mentoring me all these years with both my writing as well as reading the newsletter. And thank you for all the work you did to not only keep us informed, but also to entertain us. You deserve a happy retirement that is free of shonky, preposterous piffleters, and lemon liniments, but full of quokkas, lollies, and laughs. I send your way warm wishes for a wonderful retirement, and if you ever wander to Canada, be sure to stop by for some pancakes with real Canadian maple syrup. And if we feel energetic after a big breakfast, we can make a beeline for Bigfoot or meander to Banff to find the Lake Minnewanka Merman. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill. Happy retirement, Tim.
Hey San, this is Pontus Bockman of the ESP. I've been told that Tim Mendham has announced his retirement, and I'm just here to say that that cannot be true. That's false and utter nonsense, and I protest. A couple of years ago, I went down under to track him down, and I can assure you that he's no more than 25 tops. Basically a spring chicken. This is just an elaborate PR stunt on his behalf, and I refuse to believe it. However, if this should turn out to be true, we at the ESP wish him all the best, but I'm sure we haven't heard the last of Tim Mendham yet.
Tim is simply too good a resource to lose, and the Australian Skeptics look forward to having Tim now as a regular committee member, because his decades of experience and knowledge are simply invaluable. Tim, I think we're going to celebrate your retirement soon, probably in August or something like that. I look forward to more skeptical barbecues, maybe at your place this time. And I look forward to coming around to visit you to record yet more Books of Tim for the Skeptic Zone.
Hello, Skeptic Zone listeners. Ben Radford here from Squaring the Strange podcast, all the way from the American Southwest, where Celestia and I do our best to keep track of all things strange. Speaking of strange, I'm nearly finished with a short documentary film titled State of Nebraska vs. Kochi the Clown. It's the funny, true story of a television clown who triggered a free speech case that ended up before the Supreme Court. I've launched a Kickstarter campaign if you'd like to learn more. We have amazing rewards for backers, including you being in the film. For more, please go to nebraskavcrotchy.com or check out my social media. Thanks.
Coming up after this segment, we're going to be looking once again at the life and times of James Randi in the Trove part of the show. And with my recent work on the documentary James Randi in Australia, which looks largely at water divining, and the prospect of a possible test soon in the next few months of another diviner here in Australia, details yet to be confirmed, I was doing a little bit of research, a little bit of looking around the internet on the topic of water divining, water dowsing. And one of the episodes of James Randi, Psychic Investigator from 1991, which I'll link in the show notes, deals with dowsing and divining. And it's well worth a look. It's very interesting. The show itself is in poor quality, but it's certainly watchable. And no, I won't be spending many hours upgrading that particular episode. Maybe the broadcaster in the UK has the original tapes. But my search brought me to something I haven't looked at for many years. And this was a magazine called Swift, put out by the James Randi Educational Foundation in the late 1990s, 1999. Now, there are not too many issues of this magazine because shortly thereafter, Randi really went published on the internet at the James Randi Educational Foundation website, much like the Australian skeptics are about to do, I think, where we'll keep producing reports and so on, but they'll be via websites rather than a magazine. But Randi did write something in 1999, this is Swift Volume 2, number 3 and 4 from January, about water divining. And of course it's always worth reading what James Randi had to say, especially on this topic. By far, the most common claim made for the $1 million challenge offered by the James Randi Educational Foundation, JREF, is dowsing. Dowsing is, as strictly defined, the claimed ability to discover underground sources of water or metals by means of a dowsing rod. Another term used is divining. However, this terminology and its scope have been expanded and is now used with a far greater range of meanings. Dowsing now includes the claimed ability to discover almost anything, from water and minerals to missing children and archaeological sites. Each dowser will have his or her specialty. The device any dowser will use ranges from the traditional forked stick to just the bare hand. Pendulums, bent wires, wands of various sorts, and swiveled rods and housings are commonly encountered. In every case, the device used is a system in a state of unstable equilibrium, something that cannot easily be kept in a steady condition, and which is subject to very slight tremors, twitches, or changes of inclination. We've seen an astonishing variety of metal springs, coils, wires, balls, threads, and bobbing elastic devices, all trembling and vibrating freely as the dowsing machinery. Little agreement. Dowsers seldom agree on the basis of their claims. Some will insist that rubber footwear or footwear made of other insulating materials must be used by the operator, while an equal number insist that such materials inhibit the effect and must never be worn. Those who use stiff wires bent at right angles and held in each hand parallel to the ground may say that the wires will cross one another when the sought-after object or substance is encountered. Just as many say the wires will diverge. Some claim that their power is divine in nature. Some say that dowsing is a learnt art. Most claim that anyone can douse successfully, while others say that it is an inherited gift. Some deny that it is in any way paranormal, while some embrace that definition. Dowsers will often scoff at the claims of other dowsers, and will have a very limited set of parameters that they will accept as viable. Some say that they can only perform successfully if there is a real, quote, human need, end quote, present. Others are not so inhibited. Many say that they can find any object or substance, while others say they can find, for example, only the flowing water underground, but not in pipes. Some are specifically pipe locators, they say, and some only look for metal pipes, not plastic. Most dowsers claim 100% accuracy. Very few claim anything less than 90%. A wide spectrum of claims. Water dowsers are by far the most common variety we have encountered, and they, too, exhibit a wide spectrum of claims. Some only look for fresh, potable water. With some, it must be moving water. Some cannot detect water in pipes, only natural water. Most say they can tell how far down the water is and at what rate it will be delivered once tapped. Water dowsers, as well as some less specialized, say they can be thrown off by magnetic fields, nearby electricity, machinery, buried meteorites, masses of metal, or other underground rivers that intersect their path. The list of elements and situations that they say can inhibit their performance is endless. The bottom line is, they all fail when properly and fairly tested. There are no exceptions. Even after they have clearly and definitely failed, they always continue to believe in their powers. Why should this be so? The ideomotor effect. We are witnessing here a very powerful psychological phenomenon known as the ideomotor effect. This is defined as, quote, an involuntary body movement evoked by an idea or thought process rather than sensory stimulation, end quote. The dowser is unknowingly moving the device of choice, exerting a small shaking tilt or pressure on it, enough to disturb its state of balance. This has been shown any number of times to be true, but the demonstration has meant nothing to the dowsers, who will persist in their delusion no matter how many times it is shown to them that dowsing does not work. The defensive reaction of most dowsers following their failure is to claim that they should not have submitted to any test and will never do so again. And most will say that dowsing comes under special rules that deny it can be tested, ever. The discouraging fact is that no dowser is ever convinced as a result of proper double-blind testing, and they cannot dowse. Their need to believe is so strong and so ingrained that they will refuse to accept any quality and or quantity of good evidence. They have adopted a philosophy that shields them against reality. There appears to be a feeling on the part of dowsers that if they've been self-deceived, it indicates that they are therefore stupid or naive. This is certainly not the case. Any person, regardless of education, IQ, sophistication, or social position, can fall for the ideomotor phenomenon. An indication of that is that a great number of scientists, mostly physicists, have embraced belief in dowsing, in spite of their superior knowledge of how the world works. But this is an effect of the mind, a different matter from the workings of the common everyday objects and situations we encounter in our lives. A compelling belief. Please be aware of this, however. Though you may be puzzled over this seemingly strange conviction embraced by the Dowsers, unless you have actually experienced the ideomotor effect at work in yourselves, you cannot have a proper appreciation of how absolutely compelling and irresistible it can be and is. In fact, Dowsers are insistent that the disbeliever should try the effect and therefore become convinced by its efficacy. They assure you that once you've tried it, you'll change your mind. And they're often right in that respect. The dowsing device really seems to move on its own in response to some sort of external signal or force. As a result, some imagined or real hint from nature, water diviners are often familiar with the topographical or geographical signs or conditions that indicate the probability of water in any given spot. The operator unconsciously tilts or impedes the device and believes that this is indicating the presence of the sought-after material. This is simply not true. It's a trick of the mind, a very convincing trick, but a self-deception nonetheless. Now, I am fully aware that the Dowsers will read this disclosure and will manage to completely ignore it. I have regularly received expressions of pity from them for my inability to accept the reality that they have discovered. Many applications that are received at the JREF from the Dowsers will express great wonderment in why the $1 million prize has not already been awarded, when dowsing is such an easy thing, they say, to demonstrate. They are amazed that dowsing is eligible for the prize at all, since it is so widely accepted and believed in. And each dowser assures me that they are going to be the one to show me the error of my ways and to dazzle me with a simple demonstration. Excuses. Each dowser goes away from any trial of their powers, dismayed by their failure, puzzled at the reasons for the failure, but always capable of coming up with a reasonable to them excuse. That excuse may be one of many. It may be an unfortunate alignment of the planets, improper temperature or humidity, a problem of indigestion, too much ambient noise or too much silence, or a poor attitude on the part of the observers. These are not invented excuses. They are all drawn from my personal experience in testing these folks. I must say that of all who have ever tried to win the Pegasus Prize, and of those who I have otherwise tested in every part of the world, no claimant even approaches the Dowsers for honesty. They are persons who are genuinely, thoroughly self-deceived. In only 2 instances, one in Australia and the other in the UK, did I ever encounter any cheating being tried by Dowsers, and those cases were easily solved and immediately terminated. I ask all those who wish to claim the prize based upon their dowsing skills to first try a double-blind test of their abilities. We at the JREF can advise you how to design such a test protocol. You will find, I assure you, that the description above of the ideomotor effect will be proven valid. And I know full well that you, as a dowser, will refuse this advice and believe that, for you, such a procedure is not necessary. I base this conclusion on many years of handling dowsing claimants. If you wish to see a full account of the most definite set of dowsing abilities ever conducted, you may find it in the first 2 issues of Swift, the newsletter from the James Randi Educational Foundation. Numbers 1 and 2 of Volume 1 may be purchased for $6 post-paid from the address on page 32. We sincerely recommend that you read this account before proceeding with your application. Now, this was, of course, 26 years ago, so I shall link to copies of the Swift magazine you can read for yourself today. Well, there we are. Words of wisdom from James Randi. Nothing has changed. In the 26 years since Randi wrote these words, they are just as valid today as they were 26 years ago and 26 years before that. And no matter how many times dowsing is tested, there will always be, generation after generation, a fresh crop of dowsers willing, and with all honesty, willing to put their dowsing to the test.
You know that feeling, the gut instinct. Josh never gives you time to think, and it works because we evolved to fight for berries before the tribe got them. His Rediscover the Inner You relationship course has limited spots. It expires at midnight. His new wild organic elderberry skincare serum is nearly sold out. And what about that Temu Bohemian plush thick mild fleece lounge cover for the lounge you don't own? It's all a trap, powered by the scarcity fallacy. Josh knows panic gets results. He's not a coach, he's a master manipulator with a man bun and yoga pants. Try this, say, if I have to rush, it's probably rubbish. Then log off, have a snack and reclaim your frontal lobe. If you're sick of being pushed into stupid decisions by fake deadlines, then join me, Annie McCubbin, for the Why Smart Women podcast.
Time to go back to those newspaper clippings and articles and what have you from around the world, normally at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, if you like looking into the history of Australia, where you can see what was going on via newspapers, digitised newspapers and searchable. But of course there are many other references around the world for looking up old newspapers, and Google newspapers is an interesting place to go to search for historical bits and pieces, especially when we're thinking about skeptical bits and pieces. And here I have discovered some wonderful clippings to do with James the Amazing Randi. And amazing he was. What an amazing man, and what amazing times I had with the man. But I really didn't get to know Randi until after around 2008. So much of his life, of course, he was doing amazing things as a magician, an escape artist, and then later on, of course, as the famed skeptical investigator. So there's much of Randi's professional life that I only know a little bit about. This is when in the days when he was performing and so on. But I have found an interesting clipping here from 1974. And this is on the 6th of December, as published in the Daily Item, Sumter, South Carolina. Randi explodes myths on paranormal. And this is a story by Tom Pruitt, staff writer, it says. The photograph at the top of the item has Randi himself with a giant lockpick, bigger than a tennis racket, being presented to him. Pick presented, it says. Instead of presenting a key to the city of Sumter, that's Sumter, to the amazing Randi, a magician and escape artist, City Councillor A.W. McLeaven presented a pick to the locks in the city following Randi's appearance at the Sumter Little Theatre Thursday night. Randi, who successfully escaped from the Sumter County Jail after extricating himself from several pairs of handcuffs and leg irons on Wednesday, is visiting Sumter for Crime Prevention Week. Goodness. He will perform tonight at 8 and Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Sumter Little Theatre. Oh, wouldn't we love to have been in the audience for that? Way back in 1974, when I was all of something like 8 years old. Escape artist and master of sleight of hand, the amazing Randi, exploded a number of myths connected to the world of the paranormal at the University of South Carolina at Sumter, USCS, Thursday morning during an hour-and-a-half lecture. Speaking of famed Israeli paranormalist Uri Geller, who has been baffling audiences and psychic researchers alike recently, Randi dismissed the 26-year-old nightclub magician as, quote, a fake, a fraud, a charlatan, and liar. I can duplicate by trickery the same feats that Geller claims to be able to do with psychic powers, he announced. However, Randi did not take away any credit from Geller as far as his skills at prestidigitation are concerned. He is so clever, so cunning, and so crafty that if he were a magician, I would be running for my life because he is so good, Randi said. Now, let me comment here that, in a sense, Randi is quite right. Geller was such a good magician that he fooled many people, thousands of people, and that's exactly what a magician wants to be able to do. We read on. Randi further pointed out that Geller utilizes a great deal of psychology in performing his apparent miracles. He explained that some of Geller's followers believe he is the embodiment of the second coming of Christ. According to Randi, at a recent appearance Geller made before a gathering on a college campus, he denied that he was Christ, in spite of the fact that he comes from Israel, that he performs astonishing feats, and that he was born in December. By the time he got through using that kind of psychology on his audience, Randi said, many of them did believe he was the embodiment of the second coming. Now, if you don't think he's the cleverest thing to come down the pike in a long time, I don't know what is, Randi said of Geller. He pointed out that Geller refuses to perform in front of magicians. Geller reportedly claims that the presence of magicians somehow or other produces a negative influence on his powers. Randi said that Geller's popularity rests heavily on a simple formula, which is, when he's successful, he wins. When he's not successful, he wins. He's going to make money either way. Caught cheating. According to Randi, Geller has been caught cheating on many occasions, and when he is caught, he simply explains his deceit away with a disarming, I was only trying to please you. Randi, who has made numerous appearances on television talk shows, said he was called by Johnny Carson to help set up strict controls at the studio for an appearance by Geller. As a result, nothing seemed to work for Geller. Any results Geller has ever been able to achieve on these television shows have been accomplished through trickery, Randi insisted. He said that while Johnny Carson views Geller with great skepticism, his rival talk show host Merv Griffin believes in everything you tell him, including the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny. To show how heavily psychology figures in Geller's feats, Randi performed an experiment for the assembly at USCS. After selecting 3 black cards and 1 red card from a regular playing deck, Randi arranged them in a row and assigned them numbers, from left to right, as 1 to 4. He pointed out that only he knew which of the cards was the red one. He then proceeded to ask for a show of hands from the audience, which numbered approximately 150, on which card was the red one. The results? About 8 of the students voted for the first card, another 8 or so voted for the fourth. The second card got 39 votes and the third card got 57 votes. The third card was the red one. Psychology used. Quick to burst any bubbles which may have been created by the experiment, Randi insisted the correct vote was attributed not to psychic powers of the 57 people, but mainly to pure psychology. Randi went on to explain that few people would ever pick the first card because the experiment was just getting underway. He said the second card always gets a good many more votes than the first, but not a conclusive number, since the audience feels secure that there are still 2 more chances to vote. It is the third card which always gets the largest number of votes, since there is only 1 more choice to go, subsequently giving the fourth card the remaining few votes. Offering another example, Randi asked the audience to quickly think of a colour, a flower, and a piece of furniture. He then polled the group to see how many picked the colour red, a rose for the flower, and a chair for the piece of furniture. An overwhelmingly large percentage of students had picked at least 1 or 2 of the choices, and many had chosen all three. Randi then took down from the blackboard a piece of folded paper which he had placed there at the beginning of the lecture. On it were written the words red, rose, and chair. Again, Randi explained that the correct guesses came not from psychic powers, but from psychological influence. He said that there really are only a few colours to choose from anyway, and that red tends to be a very popular choice. Red then influences the individual to pick the rose as a flower, and the chair is a standard piece of furniture which usually comes to the person's mind before other more complicated pieces. Law of averages. He explained that in such tricks as that described above, the law of averages works very well for magicians as well as psychology. Perhaps the most impressive stunt which Randi performed for the USCS assembly was one of Geller's standard feats. He called Representative John Miles, Democrat, Sumter, before the group where he displayed a sealed envelope. Randi explained that inside the envelope was another envelope which contained a phrase, sentence or drawing which Miles had secretly placed on a piece of paper earlier that morning. Randi then asked Miles to turn his back to the blackboard while he proceeded to map out on the board his impressions from the envelope, or so Randi said. Within a minute or two, Randi had drawn two cartoon-like figures on horseback. One of the riders wore a hat and mask, while the other wore a headband and feather. The horse ridden by the figure in the hat was labelled white, and the horse ridden by the figure with the headband and feather was labelled spotted. Miles was then asked to remove the message from the two envelopes and read it to the audience. The message said, quote, "The Lone Ranger and Tonto," end quote. After the audience applause died down, Randi explained how he had accomplished the feat of apparent mental telepathy. Shortly after the message had been written and placed in the envelopes earlier in the day, Randi managed, through sleight of hand, to switch envelopes with the one placed on the table by Miles. Randi then excused himself from the room for a few minutes, where he opened the envelopes, saw the message, and then returned it to the envelopes. When he returned to the room where Miles was waiting, Randi again swapped envelopes, and the correct envelope was returned to Miles, who kept it in his possession until time for the experiment. ESP experiment. Responding to a question from a student concerning experiments in extrasensory perception, ESP, in outer space by ex-astronaut Edgar Mitchell, Randi said that the experiment proved nothing. He said that Mitchell took a set of 400 ESP cards to the moon with him and tried to transmit his thoughts to 5 different people back on Earth. Mitchell reported only that the results of the test were overwhelming, and the odds of getting such results were 3,000 to 1. The odds quoted were accurate, Randi said. But what Mitchell failed to specify was that the odds were so strong against the experiment being such a dismal failure. Randi said that with the law of averages, out of 400 cards at least 80 should have been accurate. He contended that only about 14 out of the 400 attempts to transmit his thoughts matched what was recorded on Earth. Doesn't believe in psychic powers. Asked flatly if he believes in psychic powers, Randi said, "I don't believe in psychic powers any more than I believe in the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny." I'm sure he would believe in the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet, however. He said the, quote, "so-called science of parapsychology," end quote, is not studied in a truly scientific manner. According to Randi, in order to prove something scientifically, the true scientist comes up with hypotheses, then sets up experiments to try to prove what he believes. He concluded that in parapsychology, hundreds of experiments are performed, and if only one of them happens to turn up something out of the ordinary, that is the result which is accepted as proof. Appearing in Sumter under the auspices of the USCS during Crime Prevention Week, Randi will perform at the Sumter Little Theatre tonight at 8 and again Saturday at 3 p.m. Admission for the performances is $2.50 for adults and $1.50 for children. Campaign ending. USCS students are to wind up their campaign of distributing crime prevention literature door-to-door to homes and businesses in the community today. Local bands will provide entertainment for the public at the Sumter Little Theatre before and after Randi's performance, today and Saturday. Local civic leaders, law enforcement officers, USCS students, experts in crime prevention and volunteer workers will be on hand at the Sumter Little Theatre tonight and all day Saturday to distribute information and answer any questions on crime prevention for the public. What a gem that is, what a blast from the past. And you can look at that article for yourself. This time if you go to Google Newspapers, you know what, I'm going to link in the show notes directly to that article because it's a wonderful article and there's a wonderful photograph of Randy in his younger days looking absolutely delighted with the giant lockpick he's just been presented. So there we are, a little glimpse into the life and times of James Randi in the 1970s, around about the time Uri Geller was making a big name for himself. And again, wouldn't it have been wonderful to be at that performance, and what a pity someone wasn't there making a movie. In those days it was movies, a movie of that at the time. But it just goes to show when you go to Trove or any other online resource from newspapers in the past, do a search, well, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you once again, Tim Mendham. I look forward to catching up with you in August. I'm going away for a little while, and in upcoming episodes of the Skeptic Zone, you'll find out more. Don't worry, the show will still be online every week. We've got lots of things coming up, including over the next 2 weeks. We have more about the life and times of James Randi in the Trove segment. And then after that, we've got something about Uri Geller. How about that? And then, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hey everyone, Adrienne Hill here. I was recently in Canmore and I met up with Andras Pinter from the European Skeptics podcast, and I took along my husband Greg, and Andras, myself, Greg, and another tour guide named Laszlo decided to have a dice game. So enjoy. Hey everybody, I am here with my annual friend, I guess I can call you, because we meet up every year around this time. Andras, so nice to see you.
So nice to see you too. Well, it's been great that we basically managed every year, I think.
Since Richard sort of introduced us to each other, we've met every year.
Yeah, it's your fault, Richard. That's definitely your fault. But we're happy about it.
Yeah, we have a great time. And we have some special guests here as well.
Hi, my name is Laszlo.
Also from Hungary.
Indeed, absolutely.
And then this is no stranger to me.
Hi, I'm Greg, Adrienne's husband.
And we're all here to play the dice game. We're going to put on our psychic hats. And I have here a 20-sided die. Yeah, tinfoil would be better. Andras is trying to make one out of a menu. So we have a 20-sided die, and we're going to guess. So Andres, what do you guess?
Of course, I'll be playing Susan's part now, so I'm gonna say 5.
All right. So 5 it is. Greg, what do you think?
18.
And Laszlo?
10.
And I think I will guess 6.
So close to mine.
I know. Here we go. You want to roll?
Yeah, of course.
Oh. No. Andres,
I am a bloody psychic.
you may have guessed now that the Susan Gerbic number is the winner. It is a 5. Woohoo! All right, guess number 2. Greg?
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay. 12.
12. Laszlo?
10.
Again.
Of course.
Sticking with it, right?
It must win at one point.
We would think. I'm going to guess 6. I'm going to do the same thing. And?
The spirits are telling me that I should be going with the same thing as well, so 5.
Well, most of us are boring, but Greg, you're interesting. All right, go.
8.
Oh, this is not working. So we had a 5 and an 8. Okay, so we got an 8. Nobody got that. So nobody's psychic this round. All right, Laszlo, you give me your guess first.
20.
Ooh, love 20. All right, I'm going to guess 6 because then we get 6, 6, 6. Andres?
I'm gonna add the previous 2 5s and I'm gonna go with 10.
Ooh, math.
Back to 18.
All right.
Okay. 8.
8 again. Oh, my turn to roll, and I'll go first. I'm going to, I guess I can't add all those up. That would be 24. That wouldn't be very good. I'm going to go with 12 plus 1, which is 13.
I'm going back to 5.
Back to 5. All right, Greg?
I'll go with 13.
Ooh. And Laszlo?
10 is available.
10 is available. 7. So I guess only Andres is a little bit psychic, and the winning numbers are 5, 8, 8, 7. Hopefully the listeners did better than we did.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to accept that I'm 25% psychic. That's pretty good.
It's better than the Saunders number, which was 11%.
There you go.
From the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
I think I'm psychic a little bit because I guessed 18 and 8 was rolled. So you just say, well, the 1 wasn't important.
Plus, you guessed 18 and I guessed 10, and 18 minus 10 equals 8. So,
yeah.
I love the creative math. Can we come up with anything else? Oh, look, 5 plus 8 is 13. So Greg and I got it as well. I think we're really pushing it now. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fun, thanks.